Hello, my dear students of first B.A English Optional. So, in this video, I am going to discuss about William Wordsworth's Lucy poems. So, she dwelt among the untrodden ways. It is for the Manglore University, first semester BA, and this is about session number 60. What's the learning objectives? So in this video, students would understand the Lucy poems and students would analyze the poem in context with the romantic age, the nature and the poet's attitude towards nature and the love, Wordsworth, how he projects in his poetry. So these are the things we are learning here. And what's the students' session outcomes? Students understand the poet's concept of love and students understand the theme and concepts of romantic age. And in this video I am going to cover the poem is here. I am going to recite now, and here is introduction to the poem and explanation, references and MCQs. There are 5 questions are there. Yes, I am going to recite the poem. Please hold textbook in your hand, the poem in your hand. Right, she dwelt among the untrodden ways by William Wordsworth. She dwelt among the untrodden ways beside the springs of Dow, a maid whom there were none to praise and very few to love. A violet by a mossy stone half hidden from the eye, fair as a star when only one is shining in the sky. She lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be, but she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. So here is it is short poem. She dwelt among the untrodden ways. In the next slide, I am going to introduce about the poem. So about this poem, she dwelt among the untrodden ways. So here the poet an unidentified, the speaker, the words used here, the speaker, an unidentified speaker mourns Lucy. So mourn for the death of Lucy, a beautiful woman who died young and underappreciated in the English countryside. Here for the speaker, Lucy is a beautiful, Lucy's beauty was an aspect of her overall virtue, a quiet and mysterious quality. She had, in spite of the fact that, as the speaker says, she lived unknown in a world that for the most part couldn't have cared less about Lucy. The speaker loved her. The speaker insists that she mattered in life and still matters in death. The poem has a lasting emotional impact on the readers. Right. So this is a brief introduction about the poem here. The Lucy here, what Wordsworth mentions here. So she was dead, and here he remembers her, the virtues, the good qualities, whatever she had. But there are few only could know her because she was living in a countryside, the wild beauty, and few knew her, and only few come to know about her death. The difference only for the poet, right? So here I go by stanza. So first stanza. So in the first stanza, the speaker, he talks about, okay, Lucy was worthy of love and praise despite her anonymity, though few knew her. She is unknown to the world, right? But she is worthy of love and praise. Such a beautiful girl she is. And the poem's title and the opening line, she dwelt among the untrodden ways, itself suggests that untrodden ways, right? So she is dwelt. So dwelt means here where she was staying, living, right? The set up a context of anonymity and remoteness. So which means here untrodden ways, because very few only step on that land, right? Where Lucy was living. Lucy's ways. So what is she? Or the place she lived were untrodden, meaning a very few people walked over them. It is unknown land. She dwelt there, implying she rarely left her base. Okay. As a result, her chances of encountering other people were slim. So she never talked with many people. She doesn't have much friends, etc. This is why there were none to praise. So when she was dead, or when she was there, no one is praising her, and a very few to love. She has very few people to love her. So continue with the first stanza. By noting that no one praised Lucy, the speaker implies that she was worthy of praise. So though few knew her, but she was worthy of praise. Therefore, that it's a shame. What is the shame here? She doesn't get the recognition she deserved, right? Only because she was living aloof. Okay, the question of love is only slightly different. Lucy didn't go totally unloved. Okay, because but only a very few loved her. There are few people who loved Lucy, including our speaker in the poem. The speaker who laments how seriously underappreciated Lucy was in life implies that the speaker was one of the few to take a due notice of Lucy. Such a beautiful flower she is. In the rest of the poem, the speaker will argue that even though it affected few people, okay, including our speaker, Lucy's virtue means and good qualities had a serious value. So she's such a very beautiful and a good girl who lived aloof from the society. Very few could know her. I go to the second stanza of the poem. The speaker goes on to show her virtue. Good qualities persisted despite having no audience because it is imbibed in Lucy. She had a both quality that she is a very good girl. Lucy was like a violet by Mossy Stone half hidden from the eye. Look at his using a simile here. Okay, comparing Lucy to a flower, a violet flower, and to a star half hidden from the eye. Right? Look at the comparisons here. Because of Lucy's isolation, her beauty and virtue would only reveal themselves under close attention. She was like a subtle flower in the shadow of an obvious rock. Right? We could find, even though it was a rock, inside on the corners of the rocks we could find there are very beautiful flowers. So she was like that violet mossy flower by the mossy stone. Here again the speaker implies his or her love for Lucy. There was a pleasure in attempting to grasp Lucy's virtue, perhaps because it was essentially ungraspable or half hidden from the world. So she was unknown to many people. Only very few knew her. Finding it or nearly finding it required serious work. Right. Second sister will continue. Lucy was also as a fair, so a very beautiful girl. Here he compares her with the first star in the evening. So what we see in at the dusk hour, the first star. Then we have the next stars were there. The first star, because she was only shining in the sky like the star, probably an allusion to the goddess Venus. That's what we see in the sky. It is not a star, it is a planet, but it we can see it as a star from the earth who represents beauty, love, and sex. Lucy is fair or beautiful because she is isolated. So she was living alone, unknown to the world, and that's why she became unique. She shines when no one else is able to. Everybody was not shining, but she only shining, suggesting a special power. Yes, that's the power of Lucy, which impressed our speaker. And even as she went unnoticed, she kept shining. Right. So that is the quality of the person, always shining. The speaker, by drawing attention to these aspects of Louis' virtue, look at the qualities here as I listed: her modest beauty, her mysteriousness, her consistent shining despite having no audience, claims that her virtue was powerful and good, and ultimately unforgettable. Even the poet couldn't forget the girl. These are the qualities what I have listed about Lucy. Shall we go to the next stanza? Stanza 3. The speaker says again how seriously underappreciated Lucy was in life. She was unnoticed. She doesn't get praise in the life. Though Bart laments, the observation serves more to emphasize the speaker's final affirmation of Lucy's lasting impact. That's a long lasting, still remains in the heart of the poet. Lucy's unknown, okay, lived unknown. Here, the speaker deepens the claim from the first stanza, so very deeply hurted because he was missing Lucy here. Not only did Lucy go through life unpraised and pretty much unloved, and as she lived unknown, right? But she was loved by very few. The result of which was that few people noticed her death when she was living. Okay, few knew her. Then, when she was dead, very few only noticed the death. Her absence was only felt by very few. By emphasizing this point, the speaker seems to consider a counter argument. Maybe if Lucy was so unknown, her virtue didn't matter after all. Though she had many good qualities, what does it matter? It's nothing. Right? So quickly, however, the speaker refutes this idea. Right? Again, he refutes the idea. Lucy made a difference. For whom? Her absence was felt by few. The poem's final line is an extraordinary and therefore confident and affirmation of Lucy's value. This is at the moment when she is most isolated. She is not just half hidden but in her grave, sealed up in the earth. That is a grave, right? So she was there, isolated. So now at the third stanza, he mentions that she was half hidden. Lucy's virtue is not ultimately worthless, so says the speaker, because he is stressing on her virtues. Right? It was enough to make a difference for him or her. Because of that, Lucy's memory and perhaps in a way her virtue itself survives, though she was dead. A very few could know her, but still her good qualities remain in the world after the death of Lucy. Right? That is the immortal quality what the poet is mentioning here. Okay. So once again, go through the poem, read it very carefully. Hope I have explained it in a very few words. So this is about Wordsworth's poem. She dwelt among the untrodden ways. So reference, and here we have a few questions. Whatever we have discussed in the video about this. First one: which river is mentioned in this poem? Okay, which river? So if you go to the poem, you will get the answer here. The springs of Dove he mentions, right? So the springs of Dove, where she was living. So beside springs of Dove. So that is what he mentions. Answer is yes, definitely. Answer B, Dove. Okay. Second question: where did poet's beloved Lucy live? The place here is asking about. So there are four options are there. There are cities in places in London, Yorkshire, London, urban area, or a solitary place. So answer is D. Solitary place, because she was living alone, away from the world. Okay, not a urban area, not London, not Yorkshire, but she was living alone. Unknown place, only the poet could know, the speaker could know the absence or her presence, and very few could know. That's why the poet uses it as a solitary place. Okay. Third question here, who is referred to maid here? So in the poem, who is referred to maid? So A, so Mrs. Wordsworth, B, Dorothy, C, Lucy, D, lover. What is the, because in this multiple choice questions, always it is confusing. But if you are familiar with the text, then you can choose the correct answer. So here the right answer is yes, C, option C, Lucy. Fourth question, with whom was Wordsworth's beloved Lucy compared to? What is the comparison made in the poem? So Lucy was compared to option A, stone and eye, B, violet flower and star, C, grave, D, May. So Lucy was compared with, yes, you're right. The correct answer is B, violet flower and star. So that mentioned as Venus, right? The first star in the sky. Right. Yes. Last question here. Who was Lucy? Right. So, A, option A, an imaginary girl. B, Mrs. Wordsworth. C, very popular girl. D, a rustic girl. Right. Who is Lucy? Because you know already about Wordsworth's biography. So you know about his inspiration for the poem. Right. Yes. Lucy was A. Option A, an imaginary girl, because very few, okay, no one knows that who is this Lucy, so it is unknown to us. So she is just only an imaginary girl. Yes. So here I conclude. Okay, thank you very much. See you in the next video. Thank you very much.